In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the front ABS sensor on this Ford F-250. It's mounted right behind the brakes, so we'll have to take the rotor and the caliper off to get to this, so let's get started. Let's remove all 8 of the lug nuts. To remove the wheel, for me, I have to use a special socket since these are aftermarket lug nuts, but I believe a 21mm socket is the factory size for these, so just remove the lug nuts and then, like I said, pull the wheel off. Use a 21mm socket, remove the top and the bottom bolts that hold the caliper and bracket assembly onto the front axle. We'll remove this, like I said, as an assembly. These can be pretty tight, just so you know. Leave the top one in, just a couple threads, so you can remove the bottom one without the caliper falling off. Pull this one out. Hold the caliper with one hand, remove that bolt with the other, and then you should be able to slowly wiggle it and pull it off of the rotor. And I'm going to set it right on top of the axle here. I will be securing it with a bungee cord, but this should also be perfectly fine right here. You basically want to make sure it's not pulling on the brake hose. Now remove the rotor. Now with the rotor off, you'll see where the ABS sensor is mounted on the top of the hub. You'll need a 5mm Allen to remove this bolt that holds it down. Make sure your socket goes all the way down in there, otherwise it can strip out. Break it free. It really shouldn't be that tight, but sometimes they do get stuck, so spray some rust penetrant on it if needed, work it back and forth. Once you remove the bolt, this sensor should be ready to come up. If you can't just grab it and pull it up, most likely the O-ring that seals it up is making it stuck, in which case you can grab it with some pliers, wiggle it gently back and forth and pull it up. Now, if yours is really stuck, you're going to want to spray a lot of rust penetrant in here, stick a screwdriver, a flathead down here, and try to pry it up like that as you twist it. So this little spacer here is also important. We're going to want to reuse that on the new sensor. This is now ready to come out, so we'll have to fish it out through the rest of the backing plate here. Push the wire up. There's a cutout here that it can squeeze through, just like so. Comes out the back, and now let's just unbolt it from everywhere that it's being secured. Now follow the wire along. There's an 8mm screw or bolt holding it onto the top of the knuckle here. Remove this. With this off, keep going. There's going to be 2 more over here. Unfortunately, only one of mine is still in reusable condition, and that's this one. Take that out, and that one, if yours is still good. Following it along, you'll need a trim tool to pop it out of this control arm, just like that. And then if you follow it, there should be another clip that you have to pop out, but for some reason, this one broke, so the previous person in here used a wire tie, which is fine. So I'm going to cut that off. Usually it would be clipped on right here. Now grab the connector, press on the tab, unplug it, and remove the sensor with all this wire. And there it is. Get your new ABS sensor and route it behind the shock absorber. And I'm not going to clip this in yet. I'm going to plug it in first. Line up the connector, make sure it clicks, and that's it. Usually the connector will have a point that it secures on. Mine's broken, so I'm just going to leave it hanging like that. And then here, because my clip is broken, I'm going to just use another wire tie, just like it was before, and secure it on this control arm. Better than leaving it hanging right by the wheel well. You don't want to do that, it'll get caught and ripped. Make sure it's pressed tight up against the control arm. Snug it up, and I'm going to cut off the excess. There we go. And now just follow the wire along. It had a push clip here. Make sure that gets pressed in all the way. Once again, unfortunately, this bolt right here for me is not usable. If I try to twist it, it'll just snap off. So all I'm going to do is use this one here, and this one I'm going to just put a wire tie over the other bolt. That should secure it, well, better than not being secured at all. These bolts, I recommend putting a little bit of anti-seize on them. They do often tend to corrode. And when you snug them up, just give them about 1/8 of a turn after they bottom out. That's it. They don't need to be extremely tight, and they don't need to squish down on the wire here. This is supposed to pivot around, so that's normal. Grab another wire tie just to secure this. Snug it up and then cut off the excess. Like I said, better than nothing at all. That's secure, so move along. There's going to be another attachment point right here on the top of the knuckle. So get this bolt through. Same goes for this one. It doesn't need to squish down on the plastic. It's bottomed out, 1/8 of a turn. That should be plenty. This should still be able to move around just a little bit. And now stick the ABS wire, or the sensor itself, through the backing shield like this. Make sure no debris got stuck to it. This is magnetic, so metal will stick to it. Clean it off, and now we'll put it into the hub. Don't forget about this shim. If your truck had one, it's important that you space it out properly. And then put it down in the knuckle. Make sure the hole is clean, free of debris. Line everything up. If you need to put a little bit of lubricant on that O-ring, I recommend some silicone paste, but just on that O-ring, don't lather the whole sensor up. Start in the bolt, and let's snug it up. It's very small, so once you bottom it out, you don't need to tighten this a lot. If you do, it can actually break off, and that would not be good. Next, you're going to want to clean the face of the hub here. Mine is actually pretty clean. I'm just going to scuff it up a little with a wire brush, get rid of this corrosion. But the reason you want to clean it off if you have a lot of rust is because the rotor won't sit flush if you do have all that rust built up, and that'll cause issues with braking and driving. So you want to make sure it is clean. At this point, I'm going to rinse it down with brake parts cleaner. And once this dries off, I'm going to put a thin layer of anti-seize on it. That way it doesn't corrode in the future. If you have access to compressed air, use the blowgun to dry it off faster. I'm using a spray anti-seize, but if you have the brushed kind, if anything, that's even better because you're not going to get it, you're less likely to get it on the lug studs. Speaking of, these need to stay nice and dry, so only apply anti-seize onto the surface of the hub. If you happen to get it on the studs, no problem, just wipe it off. Do the same on the back side of the rotor. You can see it's a little rusty, so sand it down if needed. If yours is worse, make sure it's nice and flat before you install it. Now install the rotor. Just as a tip, I recommend putting axle nut or just directly the lug nut on. This will hold the rotor, prevent it from falling off. It'll be a lot easier to put that caliper on without having to fight the rotor and having it stay on. This doesn't need to be very tight, just hand tight. Now the rotor's sturdy. Now remove the caliper from whatever you had holding it up, and we'll put it back over onto the knuckle. However, you want to make sure that it's facing the right way. That brake hose can't be twisted around. Slide the pads over the rotor. There we go. And then have a bolt ready, at least one, to start in when the caliper is on. That way you can let go of it. This one's started on. Perfect. So I can let go, start in the bottom. And that one started on as well, so let's tighten them up. Snug them both up first. And the torque for these is 166 foot-pounds. That's one and two. If you use the lug nut to hold the rotor on, at this point you can remove it so you can put the wheel on. There we go. Let's get the wheel back on. Install all 8 of your lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 160 foot-pounds. Once again, 165 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Double check them if you want. This time you don't have to go in a cross pattern. And there you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.